wishing I could take a break from this world. Running on a hamster wheel, but searching for something I can't feel. I just wanna be a lost girl and fly. Take a breath, feel my wings spread, levitate above the ground and make eye contact with clouds. Now I'm rising, I'm soaring above it all. I just wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free, I wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free, finally. I always stay dreaming, never imagined I lose my spark. Living in this crazy time, putting back the pieces of my mind. I know how to run from the dark and fly. Feel my wings spread, levitate into the clouds. I'm so high above the ground. I'm rising, I'm soaring above it all. I just wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free.
Race, conversations, and law enforcement. This is Moses' People Speak.
Good evening. This is Terry Watson, the host of Moses People Speak, the founder of Strategy for Justice. So happy to be back with you this evening. Oh, we have a exciting conversation ahead of us. I'm so excited to have our guest today. And I'm hoping that you all are taking a moment to like and share. Let's get this conversation started. We have a wonderful guest, and I will say that the more questions we get, the better. So to get started with, I have a couple of announcements before we begin. First is, yes, we are back. The annual symposium on conscious law enforcement and inclusive practices happening April 2nd through the 4th. It will be virtual, and I do believe we have raised enough funds that it will be also free. So please look forward to signing up. We have some great speakers lined up, and hopefully we will have a good turnout because the topic is the intersectionality of race and disability in law enforcement. So we want to have a really great conversation. One thing that I want to talk about a little bit today before I bring my guests on is, I always don't get so political in these conversations, but one thing that sort of caught my eye that I want folks to sort of think about is most recently, if you haven't been paying attention, the National Law Enforcement Accountability Database has been removed. And why is that important to these conversations? Well, the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics was taking a look at misconduct in policing and making sure that police that are not behaving themselves are not able to transfer from department to department, using this database to keep track of misconduct. Well, it has been removed, part of the DOGE purge, as we call it. And one of the things that is been impactful is that this is the database that we've been trying to expand on to make sure that we have accountability. So, please keep an eye on that. I think one of the conversations that we need to have as a community is, how do we get this back? How do we get the National Law Enforcement Accountability Database back in action so we can be protecting our communities and making sure that we have accountability? So I just want to point that out because that's something that came out and it's really been bothering me because all the work we do with accountability, this needs to be addressed. So now with that said, oh man, I'm really excited, really excited to have our guest, David Daniels. Now, I met David Daniels in Boston at a conference, and I saw his book, and his book is right here. I read it, took my notes, ready for this discussion. It is available on Amazon and other platforms, and hopefully, when we get him on his stage, he could give us a date of when the audio book is going to be available too. Because I don't know about you folks, I love a good audio book, but we're going to have a good discussion. So, with that said, I want to invite my brother to the stage, David Daniels. Welcome to Moses People Speak.
How you doing? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, man. You know what? I've been excited for this conversation. Like I said, read the book, loved the book, couldn't put it down. I think I've read some passages more than once too. When you read something, you say, "I gotta read that again." And one thing I did share with you too, which is funny. So I followed this sort of this crime story podcasting, and they were telling the story of Anne. And I was laughing to myself, man. I said, "Oh man, if they knew the true story about her turning herself in," and I was thinking about your book, but I don't want to give away too much stuff, of course. David, so again, welcome to Moses People Speak, man, and I'm so happy to have you on. And hopefully, folks ask your questions in the chat box. Again, remember to like and share, and so we get this conversation really brewing. So, David, let's get started, man. Tell me a little bit about your history. I know that you entered law enforcement in the late '80s and just retired in the mid 2000s. So, tell me some of your little bit about your journey.
Well, I was born and raised in the city of Bridgeport. I come from a single parent household. My mom raised 6 kids on welfare, but she also raised, half the kids in the housing project where I grew up with. All of our friends stayed with us at some point. My mom was my biggest role model. She spoke how she felt. She told it like it was. She didn't hold anything back. She loved everybody. She cared for everybody. She did everything that she could for people. If somebody needed sugar or they needed a loan or whatever, we didn't have much, but she still took care of people. I loved the way that she was, and I wound up modeling her behavior. How much I didn't realize I was but I did. I went to public schools. I attended Norfolk State University. I worked at the telephone company for 11 years. And then at about year 8, I decided I wanted to become a cop. And I went to my family and told them that that's what I wanted to do. Everybody was against it. I told them that I was going to, just go through the process and see how far I could go. Not giving away too much of the book, but I went through all the processes, and I went back to them and told them that I wanted to try it. I wasn't happy in the private sector, and I was a little too radical for the private sector. So either I went or I was going to go. So, I chose to go and take an opportunity to try to be something I thought would be good for myself and the community. So I became a cop, had a 25-year career, worked my way all the way up to lieutenant. I was a major part of most of the Black advocacy groups that I got involved in police-wise. And, I went on about my career. What a career it was.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the sort of the Black advocacy groups, because, I was listening to Brother Damon Jones this morning, and he was
boy. That's my boy.
He posted something this morning, and it got me thinking. He was posting about some of the Black law enforcement organizations and the purpose of those organizations, right? And of course, you've been around a few of them, and I know that when you and I first met, it was at the Noblio conference, and but you also was involved with the NF National Black Police Association.
NPPA. NPPA.
Yeah. Tell us about that experience.
Well, when I came on the job, I already knew who the Bridgeport Guardians were because I DJ'd, and I knew Ted Meekins, who was one of my strongest role models. So I kind of knew what the Guardians did. When I was in high school, they were in the midst of suing the city for equality, for promotional opportunities and things like that. And that played out in the paper. So as I was matriculating through high school and on my way to college, I knew who the Guardians were. So when I graduated high school and went on to the telephone company and decided to become a police officer in the academy, I couldn't wait to become a part of the Bridgeport Guardian organization. So, my freshman year as a cop, I joined and I started traveling, going to all the local, regional, and national conferences where I met a bunch of people. I mentioned a lot of them in my book.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
what a lot of people don't realize in policing is that, with my 25-year career, we were like kind of like the second coming of police, because in my city, the first black police officer didn't come on until 1953, and that was 3 years before I was born. So when I came on, we will be considered second generation. Now that I'm retired, there's a third generation of cops that are out now. But it was a good time to come on because the National Black Police Association was prominent. And after I started traveling and going to conferences, I met cops from all over the country. I made relationships with a lot of them. Those relationships still last today. So if you're a young black cop and you don't remember anything else I said, remember that you should join these organizations, because that's where your lasting friendships are going to be coming from, your connections for a lifetime, and you're just going to meet some really good people. Because like Terry said, I met Terry in the hallway at the conference. I didn't know him. But I've been around these organizations for over 35 years, and it's the best thing that I ever did when I came on this job, and it helped me immensely. I could pontificate all night about that was the wisest choice I made coming on joining those organizations.
Now there was one name in your book, and we talked about this before the show. That I think is a name that most people in the black law enforcement community should know if they don't know, and that is Roger Abel. And I know you actually knew Roger Abel. And those who don't know Roger Abel, he's a historian. He's the author of The Black Shield. The book is about this thick, I think.
At least
making it up. At least that thick. Yeah, it's on my shelf. I could grab it right now. But can you tell me what was that like? Knowing Roger Abel, knowing who he was, and the legacy that he left behind.
Well, the cool thing was that as a second generation cop, the first generation cops were still there. The ones that had formed these organizations, the one that had, done the lawsuits across the country to make this profession kind of what it is today. They were the ones that sued and won in court. And being around people like Roger Abel was like like a boy sitting amongst men. With all the experiences that they had and all the things that they knew and all the things that they've been through, helped us. And Roger Abel was probably one of the strongest black police officers I had ever met. He was from New York City. He was a detective. He was really, really smart. He was crafty. He knew things. He didn't back down. He spoke his mind. He knew what he was talking about. And it was just a pleasure to be in his company. I learned so much from being around that man. And then later on in life, when we got a black police officer from New York become our chief, I went to Roger Abel and asked him about him, and he told me some things that
I read that part of your book
that nobody else knew that I knew. As a matter of fact, the mayor tried to sneak our new chief past me, and I positioned myself so I'd be invited to the party, so to speak. And when I sat down with him, I said, yeah, New York City Guardians. I said, I know quite a few New York City people. And one of the names I named was Roger Abel. And he turned white like a ghost. And he was like, you need to ask him about me. And I said to him, I already did. So he knew that I knew him inside and out. So that insight was enough to set the tone for our relationship. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but
that was a fascinating part about your book. And I think and I talked about things that I probably read over and over again. And when you had the first black police chief come in, in your department, and it was sort of reminded me, by the way, too, when you talk about black leadership, and sometimes we get this idea that by having black leadership in policing means that is equitable policing going to follow, and in this case for you it did not. And I think you described in your book one of the happiest days of your life when when he departed.
Yeah.
So but before we dive into that, I want to ask you this question because you mentioned in your book when you were a little kid that one of the things that you came into contact with another police officer who was not a black police officer, and really sort of put that seed in your mind about what black police or what policing is like and should be like. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, you got to understand that, I was born in the 50s, so I was a little kid in the 60s. And like I said, Bridgeport didn't hire its first black cop until 1953. So when I was 8 or 9 years old, I saw my first black police officer. I grew up in the housing project, and he just happened to be out there sitting in the car by himself. He had an afro, and he had his little, he had his police hat over the afro. In this world, if you could see it, you could be it. People say that now, but when we were growing up, people didn't say that. It just happened. I saw him, and I could imagine myself sitting in that police car, and I could imagine myself with that uniform on. And I thought that if he could do it, I could do it. And that stuck with me. And it never left me. I could still see him in my mind's eye the first time I ever saw him. And as fate would have it, when I grew up and got a little older and then got into policing, I mentioned to a friend that, that he was the first black cop that I had ever seen. And I happened to be talking to his brother, talking about Zen. The Zen of life is just, some things are just meant to be. And I just think that, that was part and parcel to that scenario, because again, I could see him in my mind's eye today. He's been gone about 10 years, but he was soft-spoken. He let us, play with the horn and the siren, and he let us talk over the loudspeaker. And he just engaged us until it was time for him to go away. He got a call on the radio, and he went away. And I didn't see him again for a few months, but periodically, growing up in the projects, he would come in there on calls, but he wasn't like the others. He wasn't aloof. He wasn't, treating us like garbage. He was just different. And I knew that if he could do that, I could do that too, and probably take it a step further.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the steps further part, because I think, now I say that this book, the cover of this book, when I first saw this picture, when I first saw you in Boston and you were selling the book, the picture, I remember this when I was younger. I remember this picture. And one of the things, and by the way, there was a series of events that led up to this picture, right?
Yeah.
As you put in your book. And I want to ask you, when was the first time that you had to, I would say there's always that time in someone's life where they have to make a decision. They know that if they make that decision, it could lose them either social capital or favoritism, and you had to make that decision pretty early on in your career.
Yeah.
Can you explain about
less than a year?
Less than a year.
Yeah.
Can you give some insight to what that experience was like, David?
Yeah. When I was a rookie police officer, I was working in the Bridgeport Police Department, which historically was a really racist institution, had been sued by the Guardians numerous times. One of the hardest things to adjudicate in the courtroom is racism, because nobody ever admits it. But, we through a multiplicity and a number of lawsuits brought out the fact that we were working in a racist department. And there were some remedies that were put in place. Like there was a special master put over our department that stayed in power for 30 years to try to right the wrongs of the racism in our department. So as a rookie police officer, just experiencing that racism on a small scale, not to give away the book, put me in a predicament where I had to go downtown because I was being taken out of my car in bad weather. So while I was down there, I wound up near the train station in Bridgeport, and there was an officer there that had arrested two young black men at the time for a purse snatching. And when they called it 32, which means all units, converge on this one spot, I was within walking distance, so I got there first. When I got there, shortly after I got there, another police officer came behind me and assaulted the two guys. and I wound up trying to take one of them out of the train station, so that he wouldn't get beat up anymore, and get him to police headquarters. So I did that, and the next day when I went to work, I was put on desk duty, and I had to go in to see the captain. I went and saw the captain, and he asked me point blank, "What happened at the train station last night?" And I seen enough cop shows to know that this is going to be a problem. And I told him what I saw, and he immediately called internal affairs. And when he did that, they immediately told him to bring me in. And you'll have to read the book to see how all of that played out. But it's up front in the book. But it set off a chain of events where I was being discriminated against. I was being set upon by the officers that I had to work with. They turned their backs on me. They wrote threats on the elevator. They did all of these things. And one of the things they did in 1994 was put a hangman's noose in the patrol car that I only drove. So nobody else had access to that car. I brought it in to be serviced and get gas and oil. And when they opened up the hood, you could see a piece of rope hanging. And when I pulled it out, it was a hangman's noose. So rather than take it to anybody inside the department, I took it straight to the Connecticut Post. It was called the Bridgeport Post at that time. And they photographed me holding it. I knew at some point one day, I didn't know when, I was going to write a book. But when I saw that picture, which was on the front page of that publication that same week, I knew that if I ever wrote a book, that was going to be the picture. And I saved it, and it was. And just to give you something anecdotically, when I decided to write the book and I completed it, I called the Post and said, "Hey, you got this picture of me holding the hangman's noose. I'd like to use it as the front page of my book." So the guy said, "Hey, I remember that picture. I'm the photographer that took it." He said, "Yeah, you could use it. We don't even have it anymore." I said, "Well, I kept a copy of it." And he said, "You could use it. Just give us credit for it." But he didn't realize I had already given him credit in the book. So that kind of worked out. But a lot of people are always asking me why I chose that picture. And my answer to them is, why not? If you ever saw that picture, that picture would have to feature prominently in your life if it was you standing there holding the hangman's noose.
Right.
So that's how that started.
And again, I do encourage people to get the book. And by the way, David, I know you're working on the audiobook version of this too. Do you know when that's coming out?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah.
All the audio is done in my voice, and it's all recorded. It's already been recorded. On March 14th, they have to do what they call a punch-in date. We're going to go in and take out some of the stuff that I need taken out and clean up the audio and make it what it should be vocally. And within a month's time, I should have it published. So this is the beginning of February, so it should be out. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the beginning of March. So it should be out within the next 30 days. So I'm looking forward to that because it's already an ebook, it's already a printed book, and everybody wants the audio book. So it's just about done.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the audio book. And even though I have the physical copy, it's a beautiful thing by listening to the book through the words of the person that wrote it. So I'm looking forward to it. So when the date is released, and I follow you on social media, so I'll know because you'll probably post, I imagine.
Oh, definitely.
We'll send it out on our end too. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So when I saw this picture, and we were talking about this beginning before the show, is this is not the first and unfortunately probably not the last time where a noose or some type of intimidation factor was used in regards to trying to keep Black police officers in their place. I mentioned to you, we had a brother on a couple of years ago, Abraham Bowden, and in his book, he mentioned the same exact thing happening to him, a noose being put on his desk. There was a brother about a couple of years ago that had a noose put in his locker. And of course, I always share the story of Samuel Battle, who had the bullet hole put on his pillowcase when he was with the NYPD. So this is something that, has been happening throughout history and continues to happen. I was know, what are some of your reflections on that, David?
Well, a lot of people understand the process of a hangman's noose. They know exactly what it means, but they don't, they're living in today's times. They think that something like that doesn't happen. But like you said, it's more common than you realize. It happens a lot. And that wasn't the only hangman's noose that permeated our department. We found a couple more in the coming years under other people's cars and things like that. And then I knew people in the private sector that had to deal with that because they were the only black person in their division, or they were the only black person in their job. The use of a hangman's noose is very profound, because when you see it, you know exactly what it means. And if it's for you, you get the message. With me, it made me mad at first, and then it made me sad. It made me mad because I was like, why would somebody even do that to me? And then it made me sad because I realized from the stories of my ancestors that was something that they had to deal with, and even worse. But, in the 20th century, I didn't think that something like that would be possible in the cards for me. But, I deal with it.
And I see, oh no, it's a question. I think about the fingerprints stuff, and I think the fingerprints was something. No, I'm thinking about the. Yeah. So do they? Whenever this kind of stuff happened, what is the investigatory process like? I mean,
okay. Well, what happened was, actually, I messed it up because I touched it, and then I transported it to the Connecticut Post. So eventually, within a week time, it was given to our internal affairs unit. But by that time, so many people had touched it, including me, that its evidentiary value was nil. As a matter of fact, I asked them at the end of the investigation, could I have it? And they told me no. I'm kind of glad they didn't give it to me because, I'm a hoarder. So I would have kept it, and I just would have felt bad every time I looked at it or picked it up or whatever. Right. So it wasn't worth anything. Yeah, it probably could have been fingerprinted, but when this happened, departments weren't using DNA analysis that well. So I don't know what it would have yielded anyway, because fingerprints probably not, because of the nature of it was nylon, like your mother would use when she had the line outside, to hang up from clothes. I'm probably dating myself again, but it wasn't made of cloth. It was made of nylon. So, today you probably could have got DNA off of it, but back in those days, it wouldn't have yielded any fingerprints anyway. So, but again, it didn't. It was of no value evidentiary because so many people had touched it.
Right. Well, again, I want people to read the book, and so I'm being careful about what we discuss. But I want to give you the say, it was in your book. Was there any one incident that sort of stuck out to you that was a changing point in your life?
Well, actually, they all did. All of the incidents, I only put about half of what I experienced because some of it was really too painful to remember. But what got me through all of it, I mean, it lasted from that day until I retired. It never let up. It was always something. When I got to work every day, I expected to be sat upon or hurt or set up or worse. Some days, those things did come to fruition. So I was always on my toes. So the incident that stands out when I just knew that I was in a world of trouble was when I thought somebody was following me around taping my phone calls. And, to make a long story short, what happened was in the early days of cell phones, I called the overtime office in the morning, and I called my girlfriend at that time to wish her a happy Valentine's Day. When I put the phone back in my pocket, it kept jostling around. So we'll call the overtime office, then it will call her house. When it called the overtime office, they would pick it up and say hello, and nobody answered, so they hung up. When they would call my girlfriend's house, it would record a minute of conversation because she had an answer machine. So when she called me and told me that's what had happened, somebody called the house and left all these messages, she could hear my voice in the background, I got scared. So I this time, went directly to internal affairs, and they investigated it, and they, twisted it like I did it up to myself, and they paid somebody $50,000 to go to court and say that I actually did it and all of that. So I was like, wow, I had to deal. I said to myself, I'm really in trouble because the people that are doing this to me are black. It was a black investigator who headed internal affairs that actually did it to me. And the sad part was that as a DJ, I DJ'd his wedding. And, he's the one that's trying to get me kicked off the job. But, and then he tried to talk to my girlfriend into going out with him when he was interviewing her. So I knew I was in a world of hurt when all of that happened, but it just told me to be strong because I wasn't going to quit. Just handle your business, be strong, make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed because these people are coming after you. So it just made me a better cop in the long run. Made me more, I was more detailed about what I was doing, more aware of my circumstances. I was like 4 moves ahead when they would do stuff. So when they got to where they thought, they had me this time or whatever, I would just work my magic and get out of it. Because the other thing was, no matter how much we show them that we're intelligent, they always think that we're lucky this time, or, we're not as smart as we're being right now. So, they never succumb to the illusion that you're beating them. They just think they'll just get you the next time. It's a weird situation to be in, but that's what we are as black cops. They don't really want you to be there, and they don't want you to prosper. And they do everything that they can to make sure that you don't. And then when you do, you're a fluke, or, you were lucky, or, you're, what do they call them today? D.A.R.E. Yeah, all of that factors into it, except for your actual intelligence. But that's your superpower. And that's what gets you over, because again, I had to do this for 25 years. But, like I said, a lot of it's chronicled in the book. A lot of it's not.
Yeah.
But my book is, it should be a must read for young black people that are going to become cops. Because, when I became a cop, I knew this stuff was going on, but I thought, it's over now. Here it is, 1988, it's got to be over now. And it just wasn't. It just got worse. Not just for me, but black cops as a whole. Because when I came on the job, they were going through a lawsuit about hiring because prior to that, we didn't have any black sergeants, no black lieutenants, no black captains. And, these people were fighting to get those positions. And one of the remedies was a thing called banding, where you didn't go in straight raw or the score. They banded people together so that people within the band were all equal and they could get promoted. In the long run, that probably helped more white people than it did black people. But it set the tone, and it set a precedent and a atmosphere for all these racist things to go on. And it was just a tough time to be there, but we persevered. When I left the job, I was one of 3 black lieutenants, and we had 2 black captains, and we had about 15 black sergeants that I all helped get promoted because, I brought people to Bridgeport. They helped us with testing. All of that is in the book, but
right.
It was just a tough time to be alive and a tough time to be a black cop because the community didn't trust you, and neither did the white cops. So you were like standing on an island most of the time. And with me, since I was enmeshed in so much controversy, black cops didn't want to be around me either, white cops or black cops. So I had to get by on my own wits. Thank God that I had wits to get by.
Yeah. I get it. I'll say it too when I was reading your book, and again, I'm not going to go into the stories because I think even talking about your book out of order sometimes might even do it injustice, because I think even when I talk about the cover of the book, there were so many different events that led up to that.
Yeah.
And then there was events that was followed by that, right? And you mentioned, I was fascinated by the promotional story, because you even had an incident in that space when you was I think you was doing the testing for your sergeant. And I think about this because out of some of the conversations I've been having over the years, especially when it comes to race and law enforcement, promotion has been a conversation that's been a key component. And what stops promotion happening from officers who are trying to be that community, we call it the vanguard, right? Trying to be that vanguard. And why those individuals either not get promoted. And in some cases, I remember my last 2 episodes ago, we had Eddie Crispin on, who got demoted, right? And so,
Yeah.
I want to, you might have heard me talk about at the beginning of this episode about the database that's been taken down. I'm not sure. Were you aware of that already, too, David?
Yeah, it was, but we're living in those times where all of the things that we fought for, they're just stripping away with executive orders.
Yeah.
I think that, the powers that be had a lot of time to figure out how to do all of this when they lost that first election. And now, they're coming in, they swept into office. They got all the right people in place. And it's not just DEI that's going away. It's all the things that we fought for. And it's scary because, they're using the Justice Department as a weapon. And the sad part about that, and a lot of people don't realize, is that we were in the midst of reforming the police employ. And a part of that was to make police officers more accountable through means and by changing the way that we treat things that police officers do. And a lot of those things are just going to fall to the wayside, and it's going to go back to the way that it was, and we're going to lose all that we gain. Because a lot of this stuff is happening subtly. There's no big pronouncements and there's no big lawsuits going on. Everything's just being stripped away. And the way this new administration is working, it's either you're with them or you're not. So there's no autonomy. There's no standing on your own. You're either with them or you're not. If you're with them, you're good. And if you're not with them, they're petty enough to come after individuals and entities that were in the vanguard of making sure that things were okay. So we're in the midst of some really, really scary times, and I think that people are sleeping on it because they're concentrating on the price of eggs and stuff like that. But some things are, there's some things that are coming that have not arrived yet, because in the midst of all of this turning back the clock, they're also doing some things that are going to set us up economically that are going to make us fall back. The price of eggs is just the bellwether. There's a lot more coming. So we need to be more cognizant about what's going on around us. And we need to go back to our ancestors. Our ancestors didn't have a problem fighting. Our ancestors weren't concerned about new cars and Jordans. What they were concerned about was making life better for us. They did that, and we owe it to them to make sure that we hold on to those strides. And right. I hate to go off on a tangent, but this is my first opportunity to talk about it, because nobody wants to talk about it. When you start talking about these things, people start shying away because they want to stay connected to the good times, even though the good times are gone. And the third generation cops are the ones that I'm speaking of. They don't want to get promoted. All they want to do is work overtime and buy cars and go on trips. And those things are good. Those things are going to become memories if all that's coming or all that's forecast comes. We're going to be in even rougher times.
No, brother, I agree. And that's the reason why I mentioned it earlier today, was because it seems like one of those things that happened behind the scenes. It wasn't like it didn't get the publicity that I think it should have received, because that database was a stepping stone to police accountability. And when I was talking about police accountability, I'm just not talking about situations in which a citizen dies by the hands of police. I'm talking about police misconduct that leads up to those things. I think what's that brother? Corey Pegues. I mean, I love Corey Pegues.
One of my good friends.
Yeah, I love him. He said that he can walk into any department. He can say to them, "Listen, who's the hothead?" And everyone knows who that person is, right?
For sure.
And he says, and if that person is going to yell at you, they're going to strike you. They're going to strike you. They're going to, tase you. They're going to tase you when they're going to shoot you. you know who that person is at the get-go. And that database was to monitor that kind of behavior. So when I saw that it was quietly removed, I'm like, what a big step backwards for police accountability. Organizations that were behind in getting that database created. And I'm thinking about police leadership, right? So you talk about that promotion. When I was talking to some police leaders, they was like, that database is something that we look to when we're hiring people, so we can say, we're not bringing someone on. So yeah, I'm glad that you're talking about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, here's the other thing, and you know this, but I have to say it, because if you don't say it, then people just go, oh, well, okay. The biggest part of that database thing is that you've got files of who the bad cops are, because what happens in police departments, not for black cops, I got to say that, if you're a brutal white cop and you do get fired, they go to another department, because there is no paper trail. Nobody asks any questions. You're a 15-year veteran in this police department. You quietly leave the job, and now you're in the next town or in the next state. That database, a part of that accountability was to stop that from happening, because if a bad cop is a bad cop, whether he's in Bridgeport, Connecticut, New York City, Cleveland, Seattle, Minnesota, wherever. But somebody needs to track those officers to make sure that once they're out of the profession, they stay out, because you can't displace bad with good if you keep moving the bad around. And that's the biggest part of the accountability. So that losing that database is monumental. The average person probably wouldn't think so, but if you've ever had any dealings with cops, or you ever been in any law enforcement job, you already know the value of knowing who the bad people are and trying to get them out of the employ, and then they just go to another town and do the same thing.
Right, and that's what we're trying to really stop from happening. So, okay, so you know what? I posted the link. Well, we posted a link to your book in the chat correctly. I think we did. Yes, we did. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I see.
yeah. So one of the things I want you to reflect on. I know we're coming to a close here, but I want you to reflect on this, because you talked about the third generational cops, right? The younger folks, and I think the conversation about what responsibilities do they have in their position. David, I would like you to reflect on what kind of responsibilities you think they should be aware of and thinking about their career.
Okay, one of the cool things about being a cop is like watching a musical. Everything leads to a song. When you're a cop, everything leads to a story. So here's my story for the young cops. And I want you to listen to me very carefully, because this is all true. It's not in my book, but this is my gift to you. When you become a police officer, you have to decide how you're going to police. And that's an individual thing. You're guided by policies and procedures, and you've got the powers of discernment, and you can do a lot of things on your own, make decisions on your own, and you're within the scope of your duties to be able to do that. But you still have to decide, what kind of cop are you going to be? Are you going to be a robo-cop, or are you going to be officer friendly to the people in your community? Here's where the rubber hits the road. When I became a cop, I was 32 years old, and my mom was probably in her 60s at that time. When we come on a job, we don't ever really think about retirement. We think that I'm going to do my time and I'm going to get out of here. You look at yourself, you think you're still going to have your jet black hair, all of it, most of your teeth, and it's not. You're going to look like I look now. A couple of years before I got ready to retire, my mom developed dementia. And it's a disease that just progresses and never gets better. It's a slow death. Well, my mom got to a point where she was in and out of the hospital and institutionalized because of what she had. My saving grace was that in the city that I policed in, everybody knew who I was. I was called officer friendly. I was an advocate for our people. While my mom was going through her trauma, those nurses that saw her last name and realized that she was attached to me treated my mother like a queen. They really did. I would go in the room. My mother didn't even eat. She had food in the room. She didn't even drink. She had sodas and coffee in her room. Every time I went in her room, there's 10 nurses in her room waiting on her hand and foot. And it's all because I had taught their kids D.A.R.E, because I started a basketball camp, because I took their kids on trips, because I spoke up when somebody mistreated them, because I kept their kids out of jail. Instead of putting kids in a court, I took them and put them on a basketball court. Those are the things that you could do. That's the power that you have. That's the power that you wield. Good for your community. Now, if I had been one of those asshole cops, I'm sorry to swear.
No, it's okay.
But I don't think my mother would have got that treatment. People probably would have mistreated my mother trying to get back at me. So just understand that the way you choose the police is individual, and you shouldn't be swayed by peer pressure. You're an advocate on this job. One of the reasons all these organizations are called guardians, just look up the definition of guardian. That's all we really are. We're the guardians of our community. We're the ones that make sure that our community is treated fairly. That is our job. That's the biggest job that a Black police officer has. Not to treat people better and not to treat people worse, just to treat people fair and make sure that people have an opportunity to be who they are, and not have that held against them in a court or in their interactions with law enforcement. So, if I didn't say anything to you, that's what I want to say to you young cops. It's okay to have the cars. It's okay to go on trips. It's okay to have the nice houses. But when you put that uniform on, you need to be an advocate of your people. And let me tell you something. When you advocate for your people, if you read my book, you're going to see that when the rubber hits the road, they're going to come help you. When they brought me up on charges for bogus stuff, they would fill the chief's office with American flags on their lapels and waving them in the air to make sure that I didn't get screwed by the people that were out to screw me. That was a community, and I didn't ask for that. They came out on my behalf because I was there on their behalf. That's how you police. And I'm not saying everybody's going to do that, but just know they know who the good cops are, and they know who the cops are that are for them. To this day, I can't go in Dunkin' Donuts and buy a coffee. If somebody sees me in a restaurant, they want to buy my dinner. Sometimes if I want to be like just me, I got to leave town or go someplace where people can't really see me. Because when they do, the admiration and the love comes out because of the way I policed. And that's what you want. That's what you really, really want.
Powerful words, man. Powerful words. And I'm glad that you brought up the basketball, because I know they tried to take the basketball league from you too. That was one of the things.
They tried to take it 3 times.
You had to go to some big time, like you had to go to the ringer to keep that league.
No, but you know what happened? They taught me how to fight. Because see, when you're Black, when you're growing up in the housing project, if somebody don't like you, they'll just knock you out, or just you're gonna know that person doesn't like you. In the police department, if they don't like you, they go behind your back and they try to attack everything that's about you except you. No one ever confronts you directly. They'll put hangman's nooses in your car. They'll write death threats on the elevator. They'll give you the furthest outpost on an overtime job. Nobody will talk to you. They'll do things like that, and worse. But no one will ever come to you directly and confront you and say, hey, I don't like you. That's not going to happen. So, we're dancing around waiting for that person to come in front of us so that we can fight them, and that person never comes. So you got to learn how to fight like they do. So they would smile in my face and do things behind my back. So I would smile in their face and do things behind their back. When they came for the basketball camp, they didn't realize it, but I had already trademarked the name. I had already locked it up so that they couldn't take it. And I just didn't say nothing because like I said, I'm playing chess, not checkers. I had to be 4 moves ahead of them. So when they came for it, they found out that I owned it. And to this day, I still own it.
Yes. Yeah. And I love, like, I love the, when I was following you on social media and I saw that. So I already know you DJ because you were DJing.
That night.
That night.
Yeah, not that night, but in Buffalo.
Yeah, Buffalo. Yeah. And then I also know that you also are refereeing as well, so refereeing basketball even to
Yeah, I just
today.
did 7 games Saturday.
You know, it was interesting, and I'll share the story real quickly. Is when I was in college, there was a brother. He was a lieutenant by the name of Leroy Patterson. May he rest in peace. He passed away of cancer, but he was a black lieutenant in our university, and and then on the weekends he refereed basketball. So that was his thing. So I used to tease him. I said, "But you must love punishment, man, because referees get abused."
Just like cops.
Yeah,
Make a
it's like
decision. 50 people hate you, 50 people love you.
yeah.
It's the same
So
thing.
I said to him, I said, "Well, I remember, one story. So when I was, I got my license, and I said to him, I got this car, but you can't drive a car without insurance. You can't, so you can't get your insurance to get your registration. So I was in a catch-22, and I was in Maine at that, right? And so I said to him, I said, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. So he said, give me a second. He went back to his office. He got me a temporary plate so I can drive to the DMV to show them my insurance so I can get my actual registration. That was a small gesture, right? But it's some of the things that it was one of the things that he did. And I remember another story was us black folks, we like to do things on the side. Sometimes what have you not, and sometimes you don't get the right papers, whatever. So there was this brother who was cutting hair, and I was like, man, can you do me? And he was like, yeah, you know how we do, And then Leroy Patterson, he walks up to him, he's like, do you have a license? And I remember that he's like, come on, brother, you know how we do. He's like, do you have a license? And I remember, and he was fair, and he was also one of those very genuine people that I do miss daily, because he was when I was young, in college, he was one of the folks that I got to hang out with too, whilst I was in the state of Maine at that. So I went to Maine. I was in Maine, so there ain't many brothers in Maine. So to
I
see a
haven't even
black,
been to man yet, and I'm 69 years old.
to be a black lieutenant in Maine, that says a lot, But
Yeah.
yeah. But I do appreciate that sentiment, because when we look at the role of of policing, especially black police officers, and the reason why we even do Moses People Speak is to make sure that we're reminding black officers that it was the community that advocated for the jobs, and it was the community that, if you stand by the community will stand by you. So I really love that sentiment. But okay, so here's the thing, David. We're coming to it, and I see there's some questions in the chat box, so I might ask you to stay on for about 5 or 10 minutes later. But like I always do, brother, I always ask this question to every guest that comes on this show, and I'm going to ask you the same exact thing. So, brother, if you don't mind telling us, what is your message to America?
Well, I've given it to you in bits and pieces. I didn't really go like all out with it, but I'm really scared of the times that we're living in. I'm scared because I'm not in my 30s anymore, and when you're 69, you're on this downward slope. Taking pills, high blood pressure, things that didn't bother you or plague you when you were young, you got to deal with. Now, I always felt like I could deal with anything as long as I have my life, my health, and my strength. But these are some really tough times. I never thought I'd see $7 eggs. And I never thought that anybody would come to power that would be in a position to just dismantle things without any kind of checks and balances. So, day to day, we don't know what we're dealing with. You turn the TV on and you see world leaders arguing, world leaders cussing each other out, and just, things evaporating and prices going up, and, all of these things that we've taken for granted for all these years are evaporating, and it doesn't seem like it's going to stop. So we as a people got to come together. We got to come together. We got to stop hating on each other. We got to start working together, because, things are being rolled back to a time where black people had to come together in order for us to get where we are today. And we're letting it all slip away. So stay prayed up. Make sure that you take care of your people, and we just got to come together because, you know, the fight will be joined, and you will be joining the fight whether you want to or not. I think that we're equipped to handle it. I think that we've learned enough over the years to be able to overcome a lot of these obstacles, but this is not going to be something that you can just stand by and watch, because standing by and watching has kind of gotten us where we are today. So, you know, be ever vigilant about what's going on around you and just take an active part in it, because you're going to need to. What you don't do will be done to you or for you. So just be ever vigilant and ready to go to work.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother. Yes, very powerful words. Well, you know what? I absolutely love today's conversation. I will look to see what questions we have. So please, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to take a quick break. David, please stand by for what we call the after party. So,
oh, cool. Well, my DJ equipment is right over here.
You know, call the after party. But all right, we'll be right back.
Okay.
Tell us what you really mean, ma'am. Law enforcement officers should be role models, period. If you can't be a mentor, you shouldn't have that uniform.
I could take a break from this world.
All my blinders are taken off. I can see what you guys are talking about. Y'all don't see what we're talking about yet. Policing is the law enforcement arm of systemic racism.
Well, the message for America is that they need to wake up. We need to stop the repeat. We need to stop the revolving door. And we need to come up with better ways of law enforcement. Criminal justice reform needs to reflect what it is. Ain't no way in the world somebody should be sitting in jail with a $1 bail for months.
I just wanna be free, finally.
All right, we are back in the after party. So this is the time where we encourage folks who are still logged in with us to ask any questions. I know there was a question that came up here. How many years did you operate the basketball camp?
Oh, that's easy. I operated for 17 years until I retired, and then my assistant director took over, Sean. You should remember that since you came to the camp and helped me, and I really appreciate that. You know, Sean flew up here from Chicago and stayed with me for about a week to make sure that the basketball camp was functioning, because one of the things that happened is I didn't get a lot of support, especially from white officers. So through NABLEO and through the MBPA, you know, I had my brothers come from Philadelphia, from New York, from Chicago, and they did. You know, I would never have been able to do that basketball camp without them. But just so you know, Sean, and this is a part of your legacy now too, I did the camp for 17 years. I've been retired for 10 years, and the camp still goes on. It still goes on. It's just, to me, it's the biggest thing that I ever did. And I only meant to do it 1 year. And just to add to that, and I don't want to go into like a lot of detail, I sent 7 kids to the NCAA tournament, not as people that watched the game, people that played in the game. 7 of my kids made that tournament. And 2 of those kids that played in that tournament are now Bridgeport police officers.
Wow. That is a true legacy. Like I did enjoy that part. Again, I think people need to read it book, but I did enjoy the development of that, the basketball. And you also part of D.A.R.E too.
I taught D.A.R.E for 8 years. I taught grade 2.
Yeah. Okay. There was another question here, and you may have already answered it. I just lost it again. Here it goes. It was, what happened when you needed backup? Did you get support?
I didn't get any backup. I really didn't. You know, when all of this first started going down, I had a solo car, so I was by myself. And then after the stuff hit the papers and all, you know, the public became aware of what was going on. You know, they gave me a partner, and the partner they gave me was a rookie just like me. He was in the same academy that I was. Matter of fact, he sat in back of me. So, you know, he was kind of gung-ho. I wasn't. I was just trying to be low key. So we didn't really hit it off that well. and not to steal anything from the book, but we lasted for a couple of weeks, and then he wanted another partner, which was okay with me. And the president of the Guardians at that time was a guy named Ted Meekins, who is one of the founders of that organization. He encouraged me to come off the street. So I got into a community services division. I started teaching the D.A.R.E program, the GREAT program. I was doing the locks ministry. I was teaching people crime prevention. You know, I got sent to school to do crime prevention. And I stayed out of patrol pretty much until I made sergeant. As soon as I made sergeant, they dumped me right back in there. But as a supervisor, you know, you're by yourself anyway. So again, you know, I used my wits to get by to do the things I needed to do.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing. We had Shanette Hall on this. On Most People Speaking, she had the same experience where she was she didn't get any backup even in the most difficult situations like traffic stops, which that's could be one of the most dangerous situations for
second to domestic violence.
Domestic violence, yep. And she told us the story. She had to call her dad. She had to call her father to come and help her out. Like it's one of those things that is probably one of the most dangerous things.
Yeah, just not to cut you off, but let me add this too, and it goes back to being strong in your community.
Mm-hmm.
People knew what sector that I drove in, and really, people used to ride by on bikes to make sure that I was okay. And there was a stretch called Stratford Avenue in Bridgeport. It's like if you think of the blackest street in your city, that's what Stratford Avenue is to Bridgeport. So we got a lot of calls for service on Stratford Avenue. When I would go on calls, people would show up on bicycles, just to make sure that I was okay. And they would let me know that they were there and why they were there. A lot of times they got in my way when I was trying to do the job, but, they made sure that I was okay. That's why I love my city. That's why I'm still here. Everybody retires and moves to Florida. I'm right here in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I get my love from. So it's all good. But these are the things that happen when you police, and you actually serve the community that you come from or came from.
Yeah.
Upward mobility is nice, but nothing's like the love you get from the community where you grew up. Trust me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you, because you actually not only did you that's the community that you were born and raised in. I mean, that was your hometown. Like these were your classmates and I was reading your book. You were talking about even the folks you interacted with. You already had past interactions with them before policing.
Yeah, well, I grew up with them.
Yeah,
it's crazy because I had drug dealers that I had to engage, that I had grown up with their mothers and fathers. They were little kids, when I was growing up in the projects. I remember when they were born, and when I went back out there and saw that they were controlling the drug trade, it made for a weird situation to be in because, like I said, I knew their parents. Some of their parents were friends of mine.
Mm.
And, to a degree that helped me do what I had to do. And in some instances, it hurt because it hurt me to have to, to put them in jail or make them go into the system. But, the ones that I could save, I saved. But the ones that I couldn't save, they had to go. There was a saying in Bridgeport that if you got arrested by Officer Daniels, you really deserved it. And that's what the people would say. If you said, "Oh yeah, Officer Daniels arrested me," they said, "Well, you screwed up."
No, I don't want you. I don't want you to.
Let me tell you this too, because nobody believes this, but it's true. I was a police officer for 25 years and 7 months in the city of Bridgeport, which is one of the worst cities crime-wise in Connecticut. And in my whole tenure, I only arrested probably about 10 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And there's some stories in this book, that I'm not going to dive into because I do want people to actually read it, But there was a time when you were shot at, I believe, and you had to withdraw your weapon.
Yeah.
But the way that turned out, I don't think that I can tell more without telling too much of the book.
But
we'll
leave that. We'll leave
that one. Yeah, we leave that one for the readers. But the other thing that caught my attention was the high-profile case again, I'm not going to tell the story because I want people to get the book and read it. But Ann Petaway was a national case. That was a case that was on everyone's television, right? And those who are not familiar with that situation, as the sister that well, I'll say stole the baby, but I guess that's what we say, stole the baby, and raised the baby as her own until it was discovered that she was not the biological mother, that she stole the baby from the hospital. And if we bring it, I'm not going to talk about the interaction that took place with you and Ann. Right. But like I said before, I was watching a crime show with a podcast, and they were talking about the story of Ann Petaway, and it got to the point where they talked about her turning herself in, and I remember saying to myself, "That's not how it happened. That's not how it happened. I know how it happened."
Crazy. There was a Lifetime movie too about that.
Yeah.
In the movie, they had her turn herself into a white cop, a white female cop.
Oh, that's not how it happened. But you know what?
Not how it happened at all.
If you want to know the truth, again, definitely get the book Black and Blue in Bridgeport. I was again, that's a case that I remember very well.
It was made international news.
International news, and when I was listening, I was just not related to this show, but I was listening to the podcast, and they was telling a story, and I got to that part where where she turned herself in, and I said, "Ooh, that's not how it happened." But I think if you read that part in a book, it does show the work that, not just the work that you've done in the community, but the trust that the community had in you. And I think that's the part of the story that I think and I'm glad you put that in the book, because it does show, even in the most desperate situations, and I would say that Ann was definitely in a desperate situation at that point. To have the trust in a person, a police officer, to say, I trust this one police officer to make sure that I'm going to be safe. I think that is a really positive thing. So, brother, that was a great story. Glad it's in the book. I'm not going to say any more about it because I think they're not giving away too much information. So,
somebody's going to read about that one. So,
yeah. Well, all right, brother Daniel. I don't see any more questions here, so I appreciate your time. Hey, if you don't mind, stay on for like 5 more minutes so we can talk to our backstage person. But we go to bid the people watching us good night, and everyone have a blessed day.